हुआ। कलकत्ता विश्वविद्यालय में 1961 में अंग्रेजी साहित्य में एमए करने के बाद प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय ने एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया में रिसर्च फेलो के तौर पर काम किया। वो 7 सालों तक रविंद्र भारती विश्वविद्यालय में अंग्रेजी साहित्य और ड्रामा पढ़ाते रहे। प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय ने ऑक्सफोर्ड प्रेस कोलकाता, सीगल बुक्स और एशियाटिक सोसाइटी में भी काम किया। वो 2 बार सेंसर बोर्ड के सदस्य रहे और उन्होंने संगीत नाटक अकादमी में योगदान किया। ताशकंद, बर्लिन में भारतीय थिएटर पे हुए सेमिनार में प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय ने हिस्सा लिया और 2006 से 2010 तक एनडीए के वाइस चेयरमैन रहे। प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय ने भारतीय संस्कृति और सिनेमा पर व्यापक काम किया है। अमेरिका, श्रीलंका, बांग्लादेश और इंग्लैंड में अनेक लेक्चर देने के अलावा उन्होंने 1988 में पीटर्सबर्ग यूनिवर्सिटी में भारतीय सिनेमा पर लेक्चर सीरीज भी किया। विजय तेंदुलकर, महाश्वेता देवी के नाटक और साहित्य का भी उन्होंने अनुवाद किया है। प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय अंग्रेजी और बंगला पत्रिकाओं में निरंतर लिखते हैं। उन्होंने सत्यजीत रे, मृणाल सेन, महाश्वेता देवी, रिचर्ड एटनबरा, सलमान रश्दी वगैरह का इंटरव्यू भी किया है। प्रोफेसर बंदोपाध्याय स्कूल ऑफ आर्ट्स एंड एस्थेटिक्स JNU में विजिटिंग प्रोफेसर हैं। इसके अलावा नेशनल फिल्म अकादमी ऑफ इंडिया FTII पुणे में भी विजिटिंग फैकल्टी हैं। धन्यवाद।
प्रोफेसर समीक बंदोपाध्याय को सीधे आमंत्रित करता हूँ वे अपना व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करें। समीक।
And I can feel a comrade who worked in the same manner, who thought in the same manner in which I think, like a lot of you. And that immediately makes a connection that helps me enter into the field in which I would like to share a few thoughts with you this afternoon. It's significant that we're meeting at a time when elections are taking place in your state, and not only here but from all over the country we can see how the voices of the people, the concerns of the people are being sidetracked, are being trampled by other considerations and by other constellations of power, where the state, the corporate sector and capital, and the media come together and form a nexus which almost entirely stifles our voices and our expressions. As this becomes more and more evident every day in the political process, in the way as we were feeling just a few minutes ago when this young colleague of ours who was awarded the prize said how we have to find out parallel ways, alternative ways to bring to the fore, to bring to the table what is really happening and the real sufferings of the people. And for that, different ways and different means have to be created. Even as this threat, this constriction that falls upon us every minute of our existence and every minute of our struggle to achieve for our people their minimum rights and their minimum place in this whole system of the country, we feel the need for a special look, a fresh look at culture. And even as we come to think of culture, we start feeling that somehow in our national program, in the agenda of freedom, culture had been marginalized. Culture had never come to the fore of the people who led the national movement. During the time of the national movement, there was this general feeling that since culture opened up private, special, very particular, very distinct aspirations in the different classes, in the different sectors, in the different communities, in the different parts of the country, culture was a dangerous sight. And for the national movement, since it was necessary, that was the feeling, that there should be a consensus, therefore culture was marginalized, to reach a consensus outside culture, along the lines of a single program, a single political agenda, the agenda of national independence. In the process, the desires, the aspirations, the problems of the marginalized people, and in a country like India, it is not a question of just regional, caste, or other kinds of marginalizations. The most grotesque, the most horrible marginalization in the country is the marginalization of the poor, of the poverty-stricken. It has come to a point now where only a couple of weeks back, an economist, columnist in one of the big papers in Calcutta, who is also a part of the think tank of the new government in power in West Bengal, came out in the press with a statement in which he said that all these farmers who commit suicide need not be taken seriously. It's an unfortunate affair, he said, that after all they're just stupid. They don't know how to deal with life. They don't know how to take proper loans and have the proper financial intelligence to operate in the present economic system. So, in their suicides, they're just being stupid. So, this is the deadliest marginalization that can happen, where the largest section of the people can be just clubbed as stupid and thrown out of the system. Just denied the place in the system. The more and more the state, capital and the media, they conglomerate. The forces are brought together, where it's no longer a fight between the state trying to control capital. It's no longer a question of the media exposing or critiquing the different manipulations of capital. It's all the three forces coming together. And that makes culture, the assertion of culture, a very major, mandatory exercise for the progressive movement in our country. And when I speak of culture, I do not speak of a single national culture. I speak of the cultures of the country. I speak of the cultures of the different communities, the different classes, the different regions. And in most cases, these cultures are located in very specific languages and dialects. Words and expressions that are so local that they have not been translated into the national registers or even into the international registers. It is only when those cultures are allowed to have their expression, not always in well-articulated literal or literary statements, but in performances in some cases, in documentations in some cases, in the music, in the performances that they create, that they produce. These voices, these different aspirations, these local aspirations, these very particular aspirations, they come to the surface in all these multifarious expressions. Expressions that cannot always be put into words or recorded into words for the reception of the whole country. It is at that point that progressive activists in all these different fields, whether in journalism or in literature or in the performances or in the visual arts and the different expressions of visuality, it becomes imperative for us to come together to find these voices and to create platforms for the voicing and the expression of these extremely local aspirations. This is an awareness that began, in a sense, in the 1930s for the first time, with the ideas of socialism, with Marxism spreading throughout the world. And these were momentous years all over the world and also in India in the late 1930s and in the early 1940s, where the Progressive Writers Association and the IPTA came into being. It is significant once again that for the last year or slightly more than that, there have been several sessions and meetings all over the country. In Delhi, the Salmat held a 3-day seminar on the Progressive Writers Association and its role. Last month, I was in Calicut in Kerala, where the progressive writers and artists of Kerala asked me to speak at the inauguration of the 75th year of the Progressive Writers Association in Kerala. And I had the great privilege and honor of sharing the stage with the legendary Kerala writer O.N.V. Kuru, the great poet. And we could talk about the commonalities in this concern about the revival, the restoration, and the resuscitation of the people's culture. Now, as I talk of this need to bring back in this 21st century the concerns and the dreams and the utopias of the 1930s and 40s, in this whole vision of a progressive culture, I'd also like to take you back even a few years earlier and share with you the narrative of a poet's progress, the progress of Rabindranath Tagore, whose 150th anniversary we are celebrating in the country this year. I'll talk about the last 21 years of Tagore's life and development as a poet. He becomes for me not so much a Bengali poet that I adore and cherish, but more than that, a poet who responds to history and takes his position in a cultural landscape, in a cultural domain, where he is no longer the poet who won a Nobel Prize or some Western recognition, nor even a poet who once spoke of the Upanishads or the spirit of India, but a completely different concern, a different engagement with culture that came to him in the presence of history, in the changes that were taking place. It's a very dramatic story in a way. On 1st August 1920, when Tagore was touring Britain, he received a letter from Susan Owen, mother of the British poet Wilfred Owen. Susan Owen wrote to Tagore, "It is nearly 2 years ago that my dear eldest son went out to war for the last time, and the day he said goodbye to me, we were looking together across to the sun-glorified sea, looking toward France, yet breaking hearts, when he, my poet son, said those wonderful words of yours. When I go from hence, let this be my parting word, that what I have seen is unsurpassable. When his pocketbook came back to me, I find these same words written in his dear writing, with your name beneath. Would it be asking too much of you to tell me what book I should find the whole poem in? You will remember that when the First World War broke out in 1914, it was the first world war in the history of the world. All the earlier wars that we know of, all the earlier wars that we speak of in history, are wars which were ultimately wars that took place around a single site. Whether in history or in the Puranas, it is the Battle of Kurukshetra, it is the Battle of Lanka, we had the battles of Panipat, we had the Battle of Plassey, battles that are marked by place names, by the name of a single site. For the first time, this was a world war. A war which was being fought in different parts of the world, in different countries, involving so many countries simultaneously. Something that has never happened before in the world. In that span, with that scope. It was not just the geographical extent of the war. More than that, it was a war which changed the very nature of war, the very dynamics of the battle. In all earlier wars, human beings fought face to face. The man who killed and the man who got killed shared a space that both sides could approach and access through sight, hearing, smell, through the Indriyas. The First World War was the first war in which fighting planes flew over the skies and bombed people and places out of existence. The First World War was the first war in which the shells from a machine gun could hit a target 20 miles away. The killer and the killed couldn't access each other any longer. It's such a familiar image nowadays, especially thanks to cinema, where a plane flies above in the skies, a small hatch opens, small pellets come down towards the earth, and in the next shot in the film, we see villages burning, wounded people, dead people all over. This inaccessibility of the killer and the killed, of the person who attacked and the person who crumbled under the attack, this distancing meets war in a very literal sense inhuman. It's no longer man against man, man facing man. Weaponry has come in between. The machinery has come between. Industry has come in between. Capital has come in between. It's a different war altogether. It's also the first war when all that democracy had achieved in the second half of the 19th century crumbled. When a country or a state had to fight simultaneously in so many battlefields, these countries could no longer depend on the regular armies. So common people were conscripted to join the army. Wilfred Owen, the young British poet, was one of these people, was forced and watch the scattered, rotting, disintegrating and stinking. He had to watch it for 4 months at a stretch. He lost his mental balance. He was sent back to country and hospitalization. After a year of home duty, he returned to France in September 1918. That is when he was going back to the front, that mother and son shared those wonderful lines from de Gaulle. On 4th November 1918, when the armistice, the end of the war, had been declared, and bells had been sounding at the small village church in Shrewsbury, the small village where Wilfred Owen and his mother lived, exactly at 11 o'clock